At the largest scales imaginable, the universe appears chaotic, only comprehensible through theory, observable only lately, yet so much remains inexplicable. At the largest scales, and within all of this, we find ourselves here, inside one galaxy amongst billions. The ancient Greek word cosmos emphasized an ordered beauty, a harmony of spheres as a coherent whole, a beautiful arrangement. For the first time, we saw our home from the outside, small, fragile, and alone. This view profoundly changed the perspective held for humanity. It's placed within this vast entity. Looking up and out, gazing around, with an increasing awareness, we sense an order, a realization. We are not separate from the cosmos, but a part of it. The entire ordered system of heaven and earth. One living system suspended in vastness. When we look at coastlines, they appear wild and irregular, shaped by waves, weather, and time. When we step back, we see something remarkable. The jagged edges repeat at every scale. Scale the view from a different perspective. An order becomes apparent amongst the chaos, a hectic geometry. Rivers are systems in motion, constantly adapting to the landscapes that surround them. Neurons branch the same way rivers do. Nature prefers a pathway, the least resistance for the greatest reach. A constant adaptation. Nature repeats what works. As rivers branch and rebranch, they leave behind fractal signatures. Flow responding to constraint creates order. In forests, complexity builds through repetition, branch from branch, leaf from leaf. Beneath the forest floor, amongst the richness of the soil, a dendritic-like network, roots extending, combining, and signaling. Every branch a filament, an exploration. The same growth rule applies itself whether we're looking at a whole forest or a single plant. Even in places that appear empty or still, the environment is constantly shaping, changing form. The unpredictable weather and the predictable climate guiding its path. Wind over time leaves behind geometry, order emerging from relentless change. Majestic mountains feel solid and permanent, but they are the consequence of continuous pressure and movement. At scale, those forces create repeating structures, folded, layered, and self-similar. Across the planet, different environments, the same organizing principles. And when we move from nature to humans, the pattern doesn't disappear, it simply changes form. Here, thousands of individuals move independently, choosing their path and adapting their course. Yet together, they create flow, rhythm, and structure. What appears chaotic up close becomes organized when we step back. The same principle applies inside the human body. Head to toe, layered systems interacting with one another. Movement, pressure, and adaptation shape us from the inside out. A physiological pursuit for homeostatic coherence. Fascia, a multi-dimensional web with quantum-relevant physical behaviors, a connective tissue with piezoelectric properties, mechanically and sensorially active, transmitting forces, sensing, signaling, and receiving. Like the landscapes we've just seen, it reorganizes itself over time, adapting to how we move, live, and behave. And moving from tissues and organs, even at the smallest scale that we can measure, what appears random is governed by structure. Particles do not move arbitrarily. They follow rules, constraints, scattered excitability into unified rhythm. Across scales, from galaxies, ecosystems to human bodies, the same relationship keeps repeating. Chaos is not the absence of order, it is the evidence of it.
What you've just seen, chaos and order across nature and scale, is now happening live in a human being right in front of you. Jon's breathing physiology is on the screen, and the waveform that you're looking at is called end-tidal carbon dioxide, which is the amount of carbon dioxide at the end of each breath, and we're using an educational wearable capnograph to measure that. Something to understand right away, speaking is fundamentally a manipulation of breathing. And public speaking reliably increases breathing variability, which I'm going to call chaos in the mechanics. And in fact, for many of us, public speaking can elicit a greater fear than the fear of death itself. Yet, as Jon stands here and speaks, his breathing is adapting. Timing changes, rhythm changes, depth changes. That's the mechanical chaos. But here's a key observation. Despite that variability, Jon's end-tidal carbon dioxide has remained stable. Now that tells us something profound. While the mechanics of breathing can change, the respiratory chemistry is preserved. So what you're seeing is order emerging from chaos in human physiology, live. In many ways, it's the same relationship that you just saw in coastlines, rivers, forests, and fractals, but now it's happening in a nervous system. We often think of breathing as just automatic, something that just happens to us. But when we speak, breathing is a behavior. And research shows that just before we speak, about a fifth of a second before a word is spoken, the brain is actively reshaping our breath in anticipation. And that's not because we need more oxygen. It's because communication is based on timing and meaning. So breathing isn't just automatic. It learns how to meet the world. And this leads us to a central insight. Physiology is always learning. Systems like breathing don't just adapt to metabolic demand, but through attention, emotion, habit, repetition. Breathing physiology is therefore not just mechanical, it's psychophysiological. It reflects how we interact with our environment in the moment and over time. In this way, physiology reconfigures itself based on our experiences, our perceptions, and even our beliefs. Now, this matters because I assume that all of you are breathing, hopefully, and therefore all of you have breathing habits. Current estimates suggest that 10 to 25% of the US population experiences significant symptoms and deficits which are directly related to dysfunctional breathing habits. Yet these habits rarely get identified directly. Instead, their effects are normally attributed to things such as stress, anxiety, fatigue, and they're treated at the level of symptoms rather than as behavior. The important point is this, though. The body is not broken, it is adapting. These habits are often learned and mostly unconsciously, which means that we can learn new habits that better support our health and performance. Just like you've seen with Jon, even under the demands of public speaking. So now I want to take a quick look at what happens when we disrupt that chemistry. And in a moment, I'm going to ask Jon to adopt a common breathing habit under stress, which is taking deeper breaths. And we're going to watch what happens to his end-tidal carbon dioxide. Jon, when you're ready. So as Jon takes control of his breathing, he's taking deeper breaths. he's actually over-breathing. Okay, so that's a reduction in carbon dioxide in the blood, which we're measuring at the breath. And you can see end-tidal carbon dioxide is rapidly dropping. What you're seeing is called hypocapnia. It's a reduction of carbon dioxide in the blood, and it causes cerebral vasoconstriction. It compromises oxygen flow to the brain, causing cerebral hypoxia and hypoglycemia. And you can recover now, John. Thank you for that. Okay, because of that, John will be experiencing some individualized symptoms. That could be anything from dizziness to cognitive changes, visual changes, auditory changes. There are 100 different symptoms that are associated with hypocapnia. These physiological changes for some people can also trigger emotions, thoughts, memories, and disorientation. For some people, going into hypocapnia can feel like losing control. For others, they chronically habituate to the symptoms of low CO2. Now, many people, including breathing practitioners, learn breathing interventions and techniques for a myriad of reasons, whether it's stress management, performance contexts, yoga. And the one thing that all of these have in common is that they focus solely on the mechanics of breathing, but they don't address the underlying respiratory chemistry or the psychophysiological nature of breathing. Fast breathing and shallow breathing have been stigmatized as faulty breathing, yet slow and deep breathing are now culturally identified with oxygen and health. Yet someone could be hypocapnic under both of those conditions, or they could be eukapnic, well-regulated, under both of those conditions. Unfortunately, it's these beliefs that can, more often than one might expect, lead to people learning dysfunctional breathing habits. A common example of this is breathlessness, which is one of the most common symptoms of dysfunctional breathing. Some people, when they feel short of breath, will become fearful. And then they'll worry about getting enough air, which translates to air hunger. Then they'll come up with a reason for why that might be happening, and they'll intentionally manipulate their breathing to try and overcome that perceived deficit. But that has nothing to do with air or getting enough oxygen. That is purely psychological. And this is a common occurrence for people moving into hypocapnia. The logical and the emotional solution is to reach for more air, which confirms their own beliefs about breathing, provides them with a sense of control, and potentially reduces that fear and anxiety. But unfortunately, it's this type of habit that ends up being a vicious behavioral cycle where they get trapped in hypocapnia, not realizing that the solution is actually the problem. So good breathing then isn't about the best technique or taking control. It's about understanding that breathing mechanics must serve our respiratory chemistry. And that means allowing your breath. That means allowing your breathing mechanics to serve that respiratory chemistry, just like you're seeing with John right now. Unfortunately, however, millions of people worldwide are now learning dysfunctional breathing habits that get in the way of these reflexes. And when we fail to see breathing as a behavior, they often go misdiagnosed or misattributed to other causes. So the same system that can become dysregulated in seconds through habit can also be self-regulated through awareness and through trust. Trust in our own physiology. And that's the message today, is that physiology knows exactly what to do. We just have to get out of our own way and allow it. So in the essence of Atom's mission, we decided to also ask AI to take John's live physiology and turn that into a fractal to represent that trust in your own physiology. So the final question remains, if physiology is adaptive, if it's a learning system and it can be influenced this quickly, what happens when we combine self-awareness, expertise, and technology?
In the same way, artificial intelligence is an extension of human intelligence. With judicious direction and discipline, elevates human judgment Electroceuticals enhance physiology, reinforcing human biology to meet the demands we are challenged by in our personal and professional lives. Bioelectric signaling is the core information system of life. We are electric. A powerful trifecta is at play: expert knowledge, technology, and a willing patient or subject. Together, acting as a measure beyond our own biological limits in order to influence the most powerful elements that drive our physiology. This partnership, technology, experts, and humans, provide the keys to unlock the true meaning of what is humanly possible. Promote chaos, reinforce order, and achieve an ever greater coherence to realize the power that is within you. All of the imagery we have used have been sourced online or generated through AI and are also licensed through the Adobe platform. It is right that I make tribute to two people: Dr. Peter Litchfield, whose pioneering work in breath physiology and is the inventor of the Capno trainer, through which you saw my live physiology. Also Vincent Tellenbach. As you can see, I'm wearing neuromuscular electrostimulation. These waveforms were authored in partnership with Johns Hopkins and the Kennedy Krieger Institute, originally purposed for pediatrics with neuroconditions. His work continues with multiple efforts with Imperial College London, amongst others. And also, I would like to note Richard Statham, who 10 years ago ensured that Vincent Tellenbach's work could continue to this present day and onwards from here. Thank you very much for your time.